Right, it's working. Again, welcome everybody. I'm Thomas. I'm more a software developer. You will notice it throughout the presentation. It's not that perfectly designed as all the other ones, but I tried. So the project, the gift, terms and conditions apply. The gift is research about the impact and reasons behind China's infrastructure investments focused on Africa, but this is a global phenomenon. This is happening all over the world. Why this project? I will give you some background. It all started with an article I read in a Dutch newspaper, and this article was about massive wind farms that were being built all over Flat Holland to provide green energy to the people there. It would be cheap and sustainable. Yet companies like Google and Microsoft found out about this, and they said, this is great. We'll build data centers there under the premises of economic impulse for this more empty regions, with the result of them getting all the green energy in a way that the local population was only left with not that much improvement in their situation and no more green energy and a bunch of ugly windmills everywhere. And this pissed me off royally that this was happening in a country as well organized as Holland. So if we look at this through the eyes of the heist, our general team, I thought this is a clear heist of infrastructure from the people itself. But it was a massive challenge to find any data about this or any other examples of this same type of practice happening in other places. So after quite a bit of Googling and rethinking, I came across China's infrastructure investment loans, which is in a way also the stealing of infrastructure, but in a different way. In this case, they use infrastructure to gain certain power over other countries or influence by the means of providing infrastructure to other countries. So, as I said, why Chinese infrastructure and what is the relevance? First of all, it's a global occurrence. This is happening all over the world, from South America to Europe and mostly Africa and Asia. It's a big thing on the economic impact for both receiving countries and China itself. Political influence plays a big role for China, since they see it as a way to build allegiance with poorer countries that often cannot build this type of infrastructure themselves, and to gain, through this allegiance, influence on the international political scale. And a big reason for the past 20 years of why this was happening was natural resources. Since China is an economy that relies on manufacturing, it's their primary economic income generator, and for manufacturing you need natural resources, oil, minerals, all this stuff, and Africa has a lot of that. So what is the narrative? It is all about the gift, because what China does is they provide these loans and this infrastructure under very favorable conditions with very big promises of why this is that great. So I thought it is almost like receiving a gift. When you receive a gift, it's quite an exciting moment. Everybody is happy. It's the same for this type of countries, but there are some other things happening. So the first step would be the gift. Then what happens after you receive a gift? You unpack it, you unwrap it. But then come the terms and conditions in this case, because China does want their investment repaid over some certain amount of time, often in case being the terms and conditions. And then the final question: are these gifts either more a poison or a blessing for these countries? I will go over each individual piece in the exhibition that represented these chapters. So the first chapter is the gift. And the gift is all about the attractiveness of these loans. These loans are offered to these countries often with very minimal conditions. China says, we'll not interfere with your local policy making, will not ask you to privatize certain sectors, whilst yet the IMF and World Bank often have a lot of conditions before a country can even apply for a loan, making this very, very tempting for this type of country. They say this is an easy way to get this type of money, so it's very tempting. So the piece, millions and billions is about the amount of money China has invested overall in all African countries over the past 20 years, seeing billion right there at the top. Perdona. So this was an interactive piece, and the piece was about showing each country as a China $5 bill and representing each amount of investments each country has received over the past 20 years and the scale, the difference between all countries. It was an interactive piece, so you could zoom in and see the 6 countries all the way on the left, and if you zoomed out or moved to the left and right, you could see the amount of scale difference between the countries respectively, seeing that some countries received massive amounts of money while others almost received nothing. You could click and then see I will let it play for a bit, and in the end you can see, if you zoom out, how big, like one country, Angola in this case, has received almost 30% of all money. So some other close-ups, it was an interactive piece, people could interact like in the same. Then comes the part of the unwrapping of this gift. And the unwrapping is really the moment when China built all the infrastructure in the relevant country. And since often these loans do not include any actual money to these countries, only promises that they will build airports, hydropower dams, all this type of critical infrastructure that a country needs to be able to function on an international economic level. And often in cases, they bring in their own companies, their own workers to build this type of infrastructure. So the local African people there have very little benefit to no benefit of this actual big project, except of the results of this project. So when there's more power, that's beneficial. And yet, since China was that easy in providing the loans already, they also are quite easy on an environmental level. They don't, and like when, for example, they build a hydropower dam, they don't mind that much if a few villages along the way get flooded. They say that's just cost of like benefit for the country, right? So this is like the impacts that are locally made, but yet this type of infrastructure provides a major economic impulse for these countries. A quick two graphs just to give you some context. Left is the GDP of Africa from 1970 to 2020, and on the right is all the infrastructure projects that have been initiated each year from 2000 to 2020 by China. I constructed a wall since construction is all done on like cement and bricks. It's like a major construction material. So I thought what better way to represent this also as a cemented brick. So I cemented one brick wall representing the GDP of Africa in the white. So this is from 1970s. The white is all the way to 2020 is the GDP. About like in 1980s, $380 billion worth, all the way to about 2015, it five-folded the economy to what was the number again? 85 trillion US dollars. And you see in the green all the graphs, that's the amount of critical infrastructure projects that China has built. So you can see that there is a massive economic growth, and at the same time as this infrastructure is being built. Yet this is not a direct relationship, but infrastructure plays the foundations of this economic growth, because without good infrastructure you cannot have strong economic growth. Some close-up shots of the project. Then comes chapter 3, the terms and conditions of the loan, the investments China has provided. And in often cases this comes as political influence or as natural resources, since, as I said, China relies upon a lot of natural resources to get their economy, to keep their economy running. So they ask of these countries to either repay them partially in national resources or to be aligning themselves politically. So the first class is Red Wind. This is about the political influences China asked of these countries that they invest in. And a good example of this was the Hong Kong National Security Law. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but I will give you a quick recap. In 2020, Hong Kong lost its independence from China, and they were returned back to China. And during this time, China implemented this new law, and they said, this is for the security of our country, and what it really did is it reduced the human rights in Hong Kong and freedom of speech. So the UN created a vote on this, and in this vote, about 53 countries voted in favor of China, saying it's their country, they have the right to decide what happens in their country. Yet 35 other countries all said, no, this is like degradation of human rights, this should not be acceptable. Of these 53 countries, half were African countries. If we know there's 52 African countries on the African continent, that's about half of all of them unanimously voted yes without much hesitation, and yet the other half was not against, they were just being neutral or silent in this way, showing the amount of political allegiance China is building throughout this type of investment. The piece was a piece of 8 flags representing the approximately 50-50 split in Africa, of showing 4 countries being blown by the wind of the van, showing the influence China is providing, and yet the other countries standing close by, being silent and not saying anything against what China is asking of them. Another shot. Then we have the piece of called Collateral Earth. This is about the amount of resources China asked to be harvested to repay a loan. I took the loan of Angola, which was the biggest loan they provided, 40 billion, and I asked myself, how can I visualize the amount that needs to be mined either in oil or in ore to repay such a loan? As you see here, this is the Niagara Falls. If you would have to repay $40 billion worth of money only by like pumping oil out of the ground, you could spend 5 hours watching this Niagara Falls, and all the water in that time would represent about the amount of oil you need to pull out of the ground, which is quite an incredible amount. But in case you need to mine it, if your country doesn't have any oil, again, 40 billion, that would mean you could cover the whole of Barcelona in a 4-centimeter thick layer of stone in a way, like perfectly unanimous stone, or that would equal about the 245 Burj Khalifas, just as a reference. So how was this piece made? I decided to buy an oil barrel because I wanted to show the size of what an oil barrel is, and I needed some rocks from an actual place. So I went all the way to Santa Coloma to buy an oil barrel from some sketchy dudes and walk it in a trolley all the way back to Sans. That took approximately 2.5 hours. And then I went with a backpack to Casta de Faus, to my local climbing spot, collected some rocks, which individually were not that heavy actually, but put all together was an incredible amount of weight. And I took them into the train all the way to Sans as well, which was a wonderful experience. So the piece, this is the final, the representation of this. This was a piece of showing the amount of money in the middle as two $10,000 stacks, and a barrel which goes is approximately traded at like $100, depending on the current state of the world. And the same for a cubic meter of stones is also about ore is also about $100. So there was like this reference of like this two stacks of money. You can see it there as well, and here the wires would go all the way to the roof, representing that if you filled this all perfectly stacked with $100 bills, you would need to go to the roof 13,000 times, and there were some other metrics, like, for example, 121 stacked Eiffel Towers of money, perfect stacked $100 bills to repay this loan. And you could relate that to the oil barrel if you would have to multiply the same amount by that. So, yeah, that's that piece. And the final piece, is this a blessing or a poison for these countries? This piece, I asked the user, after like seeing all the exhibition, you could see the benefits for these African countries, since they have, it's like a significant economic improvement they can have. They can get money that would otherwise be much harder to get for them. The question was, what do you think as a visitor? Is this either beneficial for them or not? And I asked them to put a bow on a gift and to put their vote, and either a red one was considered it's poison or silver was a blessing. What was obvious, as you already saw here, most people considered it poison. The full data of that is 41 people considered it poison versus 6 blessings, and 2 people couldn't really decide if it's good or bad, or it was, in their opinion, both good and bad. But the interesting fact is, since I talked with a few of the people who voted, and it was very interesting to see that they looked from this from a very Western perspective, since they saw this is impacting our Western power we are having. They see China as an emerging danger for their own. For their lifestyle they're having right now, but many of them missed the point that this is for if you're an African country, what is the abilities for these countries that they can get, and in often cases, for me at least, I am more of it's a blessing, since they can get things that they would otherwise, it would be very difficult for them to receive, and it was very interesting to see. That people are often watching from their own Western perspective, and it's very hard for them to relate themselves to something that they're like not very familiar with. Then the communication, everything in the exhibition was about money really and construction. So I went with the vibe of trying to make money-related communication. So there was like this story video of a gift on a $100 bill, and some other like graphical representations of money and construction. And then I made some prints which were like the size of like dollar bills, but a bit bigger, and they were like placed in some stores where people could have like, you take some money from China and then come to the exhibition. So then conclusions. So as I said, I had a drastic opinion change during the project, since initially I also was on the boat of this is very bad, what is happening, and after doing all the research, I was not so sure if it's that bad anymore and what's happening. For sure, like from a Western perspective, there are some problems happening. But as I said, if you would really put yourself in the shoes of these other countries, I'm not so sure. I think they have some definite benefits, since they already have often cases a resource-based economy, and they are often very poor. So like, why not let China help them a bit and repay them with resources, which they already rely on anyway to make money. As I said, there were many angles and subtleties in the research, and it was like, as well, like whenever you found one angle of which you think, okay, this is the way of thinking about it, and you found something else and you're not so sure if that was the way of thinking about it, which was like an interesting but very complicated thing to deal with as well. And I wanted to say, like, what's happening has a major impact in the long term of the world, since this has been happening for the past 20 years, but the impact of this infrastructure is gonna last for the next at least 20 years as well, since China's continuously building allegiance, this infrastructure is gonna be there, it's not gonna disappear, so these other countries are also gonna benefit from that. So it's gonna reshape the world in the future into something we don't know yet, and who knows, maybe for the better, maybe for the worse. I wanted to give a special thanks to Maria, Pedro, Pau, Clara, and the DDS team in general for all the help they have provided and letting me build a wall in the back of their studio, which was convenient. And yeah, thank you. If you have any questions, let me know.